On July 4th, after 5 years of sitting on a shelf in the Disney vaults, The Sound of Freedom was released, and in a major upset, it dethroned Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny at the daily box office. However, the movie was behind far more upset than that. For whatever reason, the entertainment media complex objected to it and immediately began campaigning against it. Why would they do such a thing? We'll see what we can find out. I will begin this editorial with my review of the movie, followed by a brief recounting of its broken history and the vicious media campaign against it. While this movie has yet to be released outside of North America, the distributor graciously provided me with a screener, thus enabling this review. That disclosure out of the way, this movie, which is based on real events, stands out from the escapism we tend to cover on this channel by bringing the seedy underbelly of actual reality into focus. Pointing out the entirely predictable failure of Indiana Jones while we wait for the next Mission Impossible is fun and all, but sometimes we all need a reminder of the real world, especially when there is something that collectively can be done to improve it. This movie then follows the exploits of Special Agent for the Department of Homeland Security, Tim Ballard, here portrayed by Jim Caviezel. After several soul-crushing years of surveilling, shall we say, explicit content, in which the featured participants are not legally capable of consenting, he is no longer content with merely apprehending the consumers of such video content. He wants to apprehend the producers of it and liberate the participants in it. He can't save all, but he becomes attached to one family which he wants to see reunited, and this becomes his mission. The movie follows the orchestration of a sting aimed at achieving this, as the viewer is exposed to an underworld that is hidden in plain sight. In a time when one soulless popcorn flick relieves another, The Sound of Freedom is an extremely well-made film that must be seen. It has echoes of Rambo Last Blood, only without the wish fulfillment of Rambo cleaning up. And for a companion piece to it, I highly recommend the 2002 feature film Lilia Forever, which is also based on real events if you can find it. Where The Sound of Freedom provides hope, that movie is a gut punch, in a visceral way showcasing the reality in which the titular Lilia, as well as the siblings featured in The Sound of Freedom and the real-life victims of this particular brand of trade, find themselves. I believe The Sound of Freedom is a movie that should be seen by as many as possible, yet it almost wasn't seen by anyone. The Sound of Freedom is actually an independent film made for a mere $14 million, which was filmed in 2018 and then acquired by 20th Century Fox. For those interested in the box office, this doesn't mean the movie needs to recoup $14 million. Fox presumably already paid the initial investors back their outlay and then some for the movie rights. It was that outlay that Fox needed to recoup at the box office, only they never did. Not too long after, Fox were acquired by Disney, meaning it at that point became a Disney film that Disney could distribute through whichever channel they deemed fit. They chose no channel, or rather, they chose to bury it and write off Fox's outlay in acquiring the movie in the first place. Disney's intention was for the movie to never be seen by anyone. I'll refrain from speculating on why that might be. The filmmakers were passionate about the movie being seen though, and so they approached Angel Studios about acquiring the worldwide distribution rights from Disney. Credit where credit is due. Disney could have refused and burned the negatives if they so chose, but instead they agreed to sell the movie to Angel Studios for an undisclosed amount. And it is that amount that Angel Studios will have to recoup in order to break even or even profit on the movie. Profit isn't the goal here though, although they clearly want you to see the movie and have launched a vital campaign to that end, aimed at boosting the theatrical release, which was crowd-funded to the tune of $5 million. I certainly hope as many as possible will go, but incredibly though, not everyone does. On the contrary, the entertainment media complex are actively campaigning against the movie. One of the first outlets to declare the movie as problematic was the aptly titled Jezebel. While the piece devotes one whole sentence towards acknowledging that the subject matter of the movie is a real problem, it is questionable if the author really feels it is, because the rest of his review is an unhinged rant, going on about QAnon, Pizzagate, Steve Bannon, how wanting to protect children is anti-LGBTQIAP2S, and other utter nonsense, absolutely none of which is actually in the movie. I mean, the author of the piece goes on and on about conspiracy theories, but this whole article reads like the conspiratorial manifesto of a madman, while barely addressing the movie itself. Sadly, this same pattern of lunacy was followed by other publications, such as the UK's The Guardian. Remember The Guardian? That's the same publication that praised Amazon's The Lord of the Rings of Power as a masterpiece that made the House of the Dragon look amateurish when it first came out, conning their readers into watching it. And then, when it was over, they had to save face, so they came out and said it was a stinker the whole time. The Guardian also spoke out against Graham Hancock's Ancient Apocalypse, which they labeled the most dangerous show on Netflix. As we covered in our Ancient Apocalypse review at the time, the factual edits contained in this Guardian piece made it abundantly clear that their reviewer hadn't actually seen the series at all. Their big issue with it was that those willing to question the archaeological establishment, like Hancock encouraged, might next be tempted to question the establishment in other matters too, and that would be very, very problematic. So, with that checkered past, what does The Guardian have to say about the Sound of Freedom? Well, their review reads, the QAnon-adjacent thriller Seducing America, which they also describe as paranoid new movie. I'm sensing a pattern here. The rest of the review is less rambling than what we saw with the Jezebel, but the exact same talking points reappear. QAnon, Steve Bannon, Pizzagate, all of which is, and I quote, pointing back to a foundation of conspiratorial thought targeting the Jewish and transgender communities. And again, none of this is in the movie, which is barely mentioned in the review. These talking points, because that's what they are, talking points disseminated through the corporate press, were repeated in Rolling Stone magazine, which stopped being an independent voice many years ago, as well as the Washington Post, which is ultimately owned by Jeff Bezos. And with the movie's continued success, I'm sure many more similar articles will continue to emerge. The recurring trend here is very little focus on the movie itself, because outside of some dramatic license in order to facilitate a 2-hour movie with recurring characters the audience can relate to, there really isn't anything to critique about it. So instead, the emerging course of action here appears to be to attack Jim Caviezel and the ones that have interviewed him, and then spin a whole narrative around them, throw in the kitchen sink, and then conflate all of those made-up smears with the movie, all in the name of delegitimizing it in the eyes of their dwindling readership. But this movie must really have struck a nerve, because it suddenly went beyond articles. CNN, the most trusted name in news according to some, and televised modern-day Pravda according to others, also decided to chime in. Not to provide any kind of objective coverage of the situation, but to reiterate the talking points from the articles and encourage everyone not to see the movie.
And you seem pretty familiar with him because he doesn't really hide his association with this real wild plot that involves, drinking the blood of children and things like that.
No, he doesn't hide it at all. And you have a lot of people who are in this world of QAnon who say, oh, they don't know what that is. They've never heard of it. They're just asking questions. With somebody like Jim Caviezel, he is openly embracing it. He's openly using its catchphrases and its concepts. He's speaking at QAnon conventions. And this film is being marketed to either specific QAnon believers or to people who believe all of the same tenets as QAnon, but claim they don't know what it is.
And The Sound of Freedom does focus on a real issue of sex trafficking. But that theme, it's sort of like that kernel of truth that feeds the QAnon conspiracy theory. Tell us how those two things work together.
Sure. And the most durable and the most believable conspiracy theories are not entirely false. There's something in them that is true, and the rest of it is false. But the believers point to the one true thing, and they say, oh, you don't believe that this particular thing is true. In terms of child trafficking, we know trafficking is real. We know it has real victims. No one is denying that. But these films are created out of moral panics. They're created out of bogus statistics. They're created out of fear. And with something like Sound of Freedom, it specifically is looking at QAnon concepts of these child trafficking rings that are run by the high-level elites, and only people like Tim Ballard and only people like Jim Caviezel, and by extension, only people like the ticket buyer can help bring these trafficking rings down. So there's a very participatory element. You're not just going to see a movie, you're just killing 2 hours on a hot day. You are helping bring down these pedophile rings and save children. Now, it's not true, but it's a very comforting and it's a very warm feeling to have.
Someone else who also did their part in limiting viewership was AMC Theaters, that reportedly switched off the air condition in a number of locations. Why they would do that over what at the core is a really good film with an important message, I will not speculate on. I would, however, ask you, if you've seen the movie, do you think these attacks on it have any merit? If you haven't seen it, are you going to? Let me know in the comments.